with that, I do want to say thank you. And
Yes.
now here are my questions. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
got all that,
No problem.
off my
Thank you.
chest.
But Dr. Davis,
Pleasure to still be connected.
Dr. Davis, you must
Yes.
let him at least share one $7 recipe. Well, go ahead.
You can't do curry chicken because that's my favorite. I still do that. Give us a $7 meal, Charles.
Well, definitely curry chicken,
Oh,
and,
see?
and some, some maybe a cucumber salad or something like that,
Oh.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a $7 meal that can feed a family of four. You can give us some resources on Amazon or whatever of how we can find some of these, because it intrigues me today still to have those options there. So you had talked about your experience in being diagnosed with diabetes about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You're active, you're not overweight. Did Bob Marley have diabetes? I mean, he's not necessarily
No,
a primary relative, but
no.
just you don't fit that profile of someone with diabetes. Tell us about the maybe denial, depression, the anger, how you came to a space of acceptance when when it came to your diagnosis.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a journey. And when I was diagnosed, I was literally at a friend's house, and I was using the bathroom a little too much, and I said, it was a Saturday. I said, man, it's a little weird. And I said, you know what? Let me go to a little, minute clinic type place or something like that, because my doctor was closed, and I had a regular doctor and good insurance and everything. And this goes to the testament of making sure that if you see a sign, no matter if it's diabetes or whatever, don't let it go, right? So went in there, and doctor came back, and he said, came back, he said, you have a family history of diabetes. And I said, diabetes? I'm like, no, and he said, well, I can basically, he said, I can put you on some medication. And I was like, whoa, okay. No, I'm okay. Got into my friend's car, and I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. And which is sad, because as a Black man at my age back then, I should have been more well aware of diabetes, what diabetes is, right? But we're really not taught that in school, and especially in, let's say, high school, where we should know about certain things. We're really not taught that. So I was totally in fear. I thought I was going to die. I thought, you were diagnosed with a disease. So I went online and started doing research, and I was like, wow, it wasn't much there. And at that point, and what questions I did ask, I was getting attacked by people. And I thought, man, I'm not done messing with these people online. And then at that point, I said, you know what, I'm going to, and back to your thing about his health, I used to go to the gym, be real bulky. And I was eating terrible, though, even though I thought I was eating healthy. And I said, you know what, I'm done with the gym. I think, I heard a conversation today where people are like, oh yeah, we got to get into the gym. I said, I'm going to go, and I'm just going to walk, and I'm going to do some jogging. And I lost, about literally like 15, 20 pounds in maybe a month and a half, just from stopping the carbs, the starch, the sugars, and walking. And man, it was like a wide open day. And at that point, I said, I want to document what I'm going through. And at this point, I had no idea what I was really doing, as far as that side of things. But I said, you know what, I'm just going to start reaching out to some companies and some people in diabetes, and I can, flip what I was doing as the celebrity chef side of things on TV, and turn that into a business, as far as and a passion as far as diabetes. So, I started to reach out to some companies, and they started to respond back, because once again, who at that point, 15 years ago, as a Black male, was doing anything in diabetes? It wasn't a thing. So they started responding really positive, and ended up meeting a lady named Nina, who worked for a meter company, who believed in what I was doing, and was like, man, I want to help you out. And it just literally just started to snowball from there. I approached NBC locally about doing a segment, and they were like, yeah, we'd love you to do a segment. So I started that, a segment on NBC weekly, doing a segment about healthy cooking and bringing in people who are actually helping do that. So that's really how it got started. I will say that, and I know you'll ask other questions, but there's so much to this, because this is, being an advocate is a very hard thing, and thank goodness I've been able to turn it into a business as well. But I've seen a lot of advocates come and go because they have no support. And if you don't have any support, how much advocacy can you actually do? And I've dealt with, some of the biggest and the best, and this can be a very hard and lonely road at times. That's why I've kind of had to pivot in different ways, but still telling the same story about, better health outcomes.
I absolutely love some of the things that you shared, and I want to highlight a few of your points. First, you said that you listen to your body. You listen to your body, you listen to those symptoms. Excessive urination is one of the top symptoms of high blood sugar. Also excessive hunger, excessive thirst, profound fatigue, blurry vision, having difficulty with wound healing, in women having frequent yeast infection, and in men, of course, you can have a yeast infection also. It's called balanitis, but given that things are on the outside, to see a whole change in color in your penis, that definitely sends you to the doctor. So with one lone symptom, you went to have that checked out, and I really do applaud you for that. I had mentioned anger, depression, denial, bargaining, and all before acceptance. Those are the stages of grieving, and what you're doing is grieving your loss of health as you knew it. Here's a nosy question. Do you remember your A1C when you were first diagnosed?
I don't even, I'm being honest to you, doctor, I don't even think he told me. I mean, and he was, that's one of the things that was cause concern, that someone who was not my primary doctor was going to let me leave there with medication. So, because, when you go back and look at your A1C, and you could say, okay, this has been, because when I went to see him, actually, I had just finished eating some fried rice and some fruit juice and everything. So I said, I'm like, but so that was a cause for concern. And he was about 60 pounds overweight, if not more. So I thought, you know what, and I look back at that too as well. I'm glad we were talking about that, because I thought, you know what, I was so ignorant that I didn't take any medication, but who knows if I actually really did need some, even for a short period of time, right? It might have been 350. Now that medication would have actually helped me, even if it was, over a few months at least, until I figured it out, what was going on, and wanted to do things, maybe naturally or with medication, and then kind of so that ignorance could have really caused some serious difficulties, but also I was going to say that I lost my train of thought. But all right, you go ahead. So yeah, so I'm glad I don't think it was that high, but it also was a cause for concern, because I was going to a doctor regularly, and we obviously know they should have seen something in the blood work. If I was going on a regular basis to say, hey, I've got elevated blood sugar. Oh, what I was going to say is that in many ways it's been a blessing, because, and I'm sure you have heard this, a lot of people, there's some people who never find out until they're in the hospital with some crazy number and almost facing death. So I'm glad that I was diagnosed when I was, because it has allowed me to know my numbers, know where I'm at on many different levels, and to be able to stabilize myself.
Beautiful. Every now and then during our chat today, I'm going to drop a few statistics. I hear that you didn't take your medication in the beginning. that just, is what it is. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. The fact that you were urinating a lot, if that provider did not take your blood, or they just, pricked your finger,
He pricked it.
they pricked your finger. So that meant you were over 200 and you had symptoms. So that was a bona fide diagnosis right there. Anytime that you are over 200 and you have symptoms, again, that is an indicator of diabetes. If you have glucose or sugar in your urine, that generally means that you're over 240. So those are significant signs. Luckily, you were someone that went to see your healthcare provider often. However, if something isn't checked for, of course, you're not going to have findings. Now it's recommended that if you're 35 or older, you should be screened for diabetes, just because that non-modifiable risk factor of age is there and present. I heard you mention on a different show the number of people with diabetes that don't know it, and also the number of people with pre-diabetes, which is also responsible for why that statistic keeps going up and up every couple of years when the statistics are redone. So those things are important, and people don't realize how important it is just to say something. The fact that you've taken a big role for minorities and, for people, all over the world to say something and to create a safe space so that we don't have to keep it all to ourselves. You're to be applauded for that. Cheryl, let's see what kind of questions that you have. I know that we have a break coming up. But
we do. We've got about 8 minutes before the break, and,
8 minutes.
You being our clinician on the show and hearing Charles talk about that first experience, I wanted to ask you: did you even know what an A1C was? And Dr. Davis, will you share with our radio listening audience who may not even know we use these acronyms? But I wanted to find out from Charles if he had ever heard that before you went to the doctor. And that was the first question. The second one was, I've heard both of you talk about frequent urination, but help us understand how frequent is frequent.
Yeah.
Charles?
I had no idea what an A1C was.
Okay.
And it's interesting because my aunt actually has diabetes and is on does dialysis even back then. But I never made the correlation of diabetes and what she was dealing with, and I never even thought about it. So I had no idea what an A1C1 was. And then later on, like I said, it was troubling, because if he made this diagnosis and was ready to give me medication, I would have really loved him to say, hey, listen, follow up on Monday with your primary care ASAP, get this test. Here's a resource to go look online and get some information, or here was something that you could have taken to read up on diabetes. It would have been so much easier. So no, I didn't know what an A1C was. No, not at all.
And when you guys use that term frequent,
this was surprising for me, but as Doctor is sharing it, that was definitely a number. If that's what it was, or somewhere around there, higher than that definitely caused me to kind of, I would say I was going maybe every 5-6 minutes or something like that.
That's very frequent. Okay. Yeah. Well, people need to know this though.
Maybe somewhere, maybe about 5, 6, 7 minutes. It was, and I thought it was maybe because of what I was drinking, or if I was drinking too much, so on and so forth. So that was concerning,
Okay, Dr. Davis, break it down. A1C.
Absolutely. A1C is how well the blood sugar has been managed over the past 2 to 3 months. Sometimes you go and have the blood work done, or have your labs collected as your provider has instructed you to, and you say, well, I'm not going to eat, I'm going to fast for 2 days or something like that, to make sure those numbers are right. Actually, the A1C, again, from 2 to 3 months ago, it's a look into the past. That's something that you cannot change. And hemoglobin A1C, there's this process called glycosylation, and don't worry about that. But
yeah, we know about
essentially, the red blood cell, it lives for about 2 to 3 months in your body.
Okay.
And before your body recycles the red blood cells, glucose has an affinity to the cells. So however much sugar or glucose molecule is stuck to those red cells, we measure that. And that's how we come up with the A1C. If there's a lot of glucose in the blood, then the higher that number read, and it reads as a percentage. So that's what an A1C is. Regarding the frequent urination, when I explain a phenomena to my patients, I love to use metaphors, analogies, similes, because I try and meet people where they are. And Charles definitely understands that. You, Charlotte, you've heard me explain things. So if things don't resonate, if things don't make sense to people, it's not meaningful, and they don't change their behavioral practices.
Right.
So for frequent urination, I often use, of course, the person has to be a little bit older, but there used to be orange juice containers that they were in the freezer section, or any kind of beverage that's in the freezer section. You take it home and you have to add water to it. It's concentrated. Yeah, you have to add water to it to make it palatable. If you were to sip that, on its own while it's concentrated, you almost need something else to drink to tolerate it, because it's concentrated. So as you have to hydrate your palate to be able to get it down, to be able to tolerate that concentrated beverage, when there's lots of glucose in your blood, the body pulls water from other spaces in the body so that your kidneys won't be saturated with glucose, to help your body better process this concentrated amount of sugar in the blood per se. Also, the kidneys try hard, understanding that glucose or sugar is energy to the body, food to the body, carbohydrates to the body is like gas to a car. So it's not bad for you. It is just that your body doesn't have the insulin to manage it all. So part of what the kidneys do, as well as filtering the bad stuff out of blood, and that goes away in your urine, it helps to conserve the good stuff. And energy is good. Now, if your blood sugar is high, you don't really need to conserve that much. But if you start to spill glucose in your urine, it just means that the kidney can't hold it all. And that point happens about 240, 250. So if you're spilling glucose in your urine, that gives us an idea, without checking your blood, where you are on the scale of glucose control. So that's where the frequent urination comes from. Of course, if your body is pulling water from other areas of the body, that's where the thirst comes from, because the body isn't getting that energy that's stuck in the blood when it's supposed to be in the cells. That's where the hunger comes from. And if you don't have any energy in your cells, you're tired. So it all goes together. And I try to explain it that way to make it more meaningful for my patients.
Well, you did. And that makes sense. You did. And that makes sense. And we want to hear, this is Charles in his own words. Ricky, are you ready to cue up Diabetes and You? And as Ricky is cueing the video up, it's a short video, but it helps you to kind of fully understand what Dr. Davis is talking about. And now you know, all of our radio listening audience, you know the reason behind the frequent urination. You know now clinically what's going on in your body, so you can further understand that. You understand the thirst. We couldn't explain it before, but Dr. Davis has broken it down as you've listened to them talk about some of those symptoms. Ready? Ricky, we're ready when you are. Let's go. Diabetes and You.
The reality of diabetes. Most people think it's just sugar, or you might have to take a pill, or you might have to change the way you eat.
And America's battle against diabetes.
An epidemic of type 2 diabetes.
Diabetes doesn't just affect patients physically.
This problem is getting worse, and if we don't do something about it, we're in a lot of trouble.
You got to talk about this thing. We have an epidemic in this country.
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Back in 2006, I stepped on a nail. Did you know you
diabetic.
Diabetes is a disease that hits you early.
The main reason that it gets started is insulin resistance.
The realities of this disease is that it destroys organs.
Blindness, heart disease, stroke, kidney failure.
It is a wicked, wicked demon from hell that will control you. So it's 8:38 in the morning. I am on my way to the hospital.
Can you read?
The way that Americans eat, a lot of times we don't even realize that what we're eating is so bad.
And you think eating that every now and then is okay? Diabetes, how serious is it?
This is what diabetes has done to me. It will rot your teeth away.
So the problem is that doctors are stuck in the middle here.
We as doctors have been treating type 2 diabetes completely incorrectly.
We're fighting the same fight, huh?
Absolutely.
You're in India, I'm in America, we're fighting the same fight. Is he scared of dying from diabetes? You know, who wants to be in the doctor's office? Who wants to have to go through all of this? You know, I mean, I wish I knew about this stuff. It's kind of scary, you know. Let's just pray this is all right.
Do I keep having heart attacks until I die?
Whereas I see the people who are getting sick, I said, okay, that's not right. That's not right because I know it's a reversible disease.
Yeah.
Ooh, I've seen this several times.
Yeah.
And each time it just moves me. It's hard. And to hear the gentleman say diabetes is wicked. It's scary. But information, knowledge is power, but it becomes powerful when we can apply it. Like what you and Dr. Davis are sharing with us today.
I would
Charles, I know you felt that was your baby. You birthed that. Kudos to you. How long to produce a segment like that?
Well, that took a few years. You know, real documentaries that really go back in time and things like that. It takes time. And I was growing in the process and telling stories around the country. But I will say this, you know, one of the things I like to do is really go into how serious diabetes is. So I know that there's people watching right now and they may be listening, but I want them to understand that diabetes, it takes more lives than AIDS and cancer combined, right? It's the number one a cause of amputation, number one cause of blindness, number one cause of dialysis, and the list goes on. Number one cause of diabetes. 98% of people who with die of heart disease.
Yes.
You know, so this is a very serious condition, and if not taken, you know, serious, will have tremendous consequences on so many other parts of the body. It's literally can ravage the body. And, you know, while we can talk about this from a light perspective, you have to take control of your condition if you have diabetes, if you know someone with diabetes, because, you know, we only have one shot at this beautiful ride, and you don't want to, you know, spend your days going to different hospitals and doctors. And at times, even though I've controlled my diabetes, there's times where it's fearful, and you're like, what is going on? You know, why can't I, you know, beat this? For a while, I've had very high cardiac CRP, and doctor actually, you know, can share what that is. That's another test that people actually really need to know about. That I would say more than 9 out of 10% of us would never know, even to go and ask for that test, which is very important. So if you're listening to this and you have diabetes, realize that you need to be here for your family. You need to be here for yourself. I've got some beautiful kids that I want to stay alive for. I've got a good ride that I want to stay alive for. And God knows that, you know, diabetes is a monster for some people. And while I've been able to control it somewhat and pretty good, there's some people who, you know, I've been at, you know, kidney doctors and things like that, where I was scared because of the protein in my urine, and things like that. And it was just no fun. But And then I'll let you guys jump back in. But one of the things I also had to realize, and I realized this probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was I have a food addiction. And I might not be like my 600-pound life, but I can go 3 or 4 days fantastic, very healthy. And in the past, I've found myself running out at 12 o'clock at night trying to find an open McDonald's and beef patties and potato chips and things like that. So a lot of us are actually suffering from food addictions, and we have no clue of that we're even addicted to food the way we are. So just wanted to throw some things out there because I like to get to the meat of it and realize that this is a serious thing that needs to be taken into full control.
It is. Thank you so much, Charles. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for allowing us to share your work, just a small piece of your work. While I have you and having a conversation and asking my questions, Ricky has been putting up a few images to further direct our audience. We have people tuning in on Facebook, so please like and share Charles's message. This is so important because in every family that I know of, they're diabetics in our families. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity, we could do it a little later, to make sure you share your website. How can people get in touch with you? We can leave that for your final thoughts, so you can go ahead and push that right now. So as people are sharing this video, they will be able to look you up as well. But again, job well done. There's other films out there that our radio listening audience should share. And you know what? We'll be getting together with our families for Thanksgiving. Have the conversation, because we will be eating. Dr. Davis may come in and give us some points and some tips about that. And she's going to tell you why you feel the way you feel and how your blood sugar could possibly spike because of our diets on that day. I just wanted to personally say thank you, Charles. If you want to go ahead and share that information, and after that, Dr. Davis will come back and she's going to talk to us about switching gears. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Yeah, the best way to reach me is you can just Google me, Charles Maddox, CharlesMatts, Charles Maddox, and I'm not hard to find. So
you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I Googled you too. You're right. Dr. Davis.
Absolutely. I just want to harken back on that Google and that accessibility. I wanted to know about that $7 meal, and that's how I found Charles Maddox. So you had mentioned the CRP, the C-reactive protein test. That is an inflammatory marker, and the more sophisticated doctors may check it if you have one of those insurance plans that those academic measures can be taken and discussed. But sometimes there is an uninsured or an underinsured issue. Some of maybe the federal qualified health centers have to get the patients in and out, or one of these value-based care arrangements have to get the patients in and out. You just don't have time to have those conversations. And what does the provider do with that information? The same thing that they would do otherwise, given that guidelines are the guideline issues are being checked off and you're being treated in accord with those things. But why is an inflammatory marker important? It's important because we need to understand, one, the impact of chronic disease on our body's inflammatory tendencies. High blood sugar is one of those factors that increases the inflammation of the inner linings of the blood vessels. And that's in other areas too, but the inner linings of the blood vessels matter significantly. If it's a big blood vessel, like your aorta, or moderate sized blood vessel, like those around your heart, or a teeny tiny blood vessel, like, the capillaries, those furthest away from the heart actually are affected more. So when you talk about those eye problems, the kidney problems, the nerve problems, those microvascular disorders that warrant the yearly eye check, the foot check, the urine protein test, looking for those indicators of complications early on so that we have more opportunity with more options to manage those things before things get really bad per se. But those microvascular issues also, and swelling in those really small blood vessels, make it hard for your body to heal itself, for those products of your immune system that go through your blood vessels and which are supposed to seep out to the areas of your body to treat them. That's hard when the inner lining of your vessels, are swollen. So that's in part how some of those complications come about. The worse they are, the bigger the blood vessel that is affected. So yeah, people with diabetes, particularly uncontrolled diabetes, have a greater risk for cardiovascular disorders. Emphasis that means heart attacks, strokes as well, because there are arteries and blood vessels that send blood to the brain. If there's blockage, that means there's an interruption in blood supply. So that's in part a kind of a stroke. But guess what? When you have lesions and sores that heal poorly, or you have toes that won't come back to the general color, or wounds down there that won't heal, that's essentially peripheral vascular disease or a leg attack. So that's how these things come about. It's tough to make those connections, but I hope that has helped some. One other thing that I want to address before we flip, change gears and talk about this longevity concept that Charles also has, a documentary about, is that food addiction part. I can appreciate that. And it is something that I like to talk about with my patients, because a food addiction or this incessant hunger is not always your fault as someone with diabetes. Most of us have heard about this semaglutide and these made up, medicines that mimic medications for diabetes. First and foremost, semaglutide or Ozempic and Wegovy, that's still on patent. So what we're getting from a compounded pharmacy, it's hard to identify that. It's hard to identify the medium that the active ingredient is put in for delivery to the person taking it. And then what is that active ingredient, given that the medication still is on patent? But I digress. This GLP-1 receptor agonist, I like to use those words because at some point you may hear them again, that semaglutide and medicines like it actually are. They mimic, per se, a hormone that our body makes anyway. We make GLP-1 from our intestines, and it does play a large part in our ability to use glucose or carbohydrate after it's broken down. And remember, sugar to the body is like gas to a car, and glucose is sugar. Okay, so if it plays a role in the way our body uses energy, then that hormone is very, very important. These medications like Ozempic, like Wegovy, like Trulicity, those medicines in that category, they have an affinity to the same receptors that hormone sticks to. Okay, so what the science has shown us over the years, and I'm just speaking in plain terms so everyone can have and appreciate the meanings behind all of these things. That hormone is important because it does a few very important things. First, it moderates the amount of insulin that comes from the pancreas. That makes it release insulin only when food is present. Only when food is present. And that's important because insulin does a great job of managing blood sugar, but it also does a great job of storing the residual. It makes you a more efficient fat maker. So when we moderate that, when we do a better job of controlling that, we're less efficient in making fat. And that's cool. The other thing that GLP-1 does, it slows the rate that food moves from one end to the other. So there's a greater opportunity for satiation. You get full and your body tells you to push back from the table. And some of those receptors are in our brain, and it tells us that we're not hungry. It tells us that we're full. So when we have a less GLP-1 that our body is producing, because we're supposed to make that. But when you have diabetes, you don't make the same amount. So when you have lower levels of GLP-1, yeah, you may have a food addiction. Yeah, you are hungry a bit more often. And I try to encourage patients that have diabetes and tell them that it's not their fault. Even if there's a discipline issue, it's not all their fault. You know, some people, sometimes, you know, there's emotional eating. Sometimes there are a ton of different variables that are not considered. But a lack of discipline cannot be it. So to motivate patients to do more on their own, to help them to be better self-managers, is part of what you have to do as a good clinician. Diabetes management is a team sport, and that's being a good team member. So I hope that made sense.
It did. I mean, to a layperson like myself, because this subject is not new. You've been talking about this for years, Dr. Davis, especially when it comes to talking about semaglutide. And now we're hearing names. I heard you say Wegovy, Ozempic. They're all, the commercials, the television is saturated with it. The internet is saturated with, even 60 Minutes, they're doing specials. All types of shows are doing specials. But unless you have what you shared with us today and understanding the hormone and how that interacts with your body, your blood sugar, your producing insulin, how it reacts with your pancreas, that's the missing link. People aren't getting that information. And that's why it's so important that if you want to know the facts, you know, talk to the specialist, especially a diabetic specialist, a diabetes specialist. So thank you for breaking that down in layman's terms. Dr. Davis.
It's my pleasure. That's what we do at Your Best You.
That's what you do. That's what you do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess you're going to switch gears now, since you've so eloquently broken. You've given us some key information that we need to know when we talk about A1C, when we talk about, you know, the hormones. What average person knows about, and give it to me again, the GLP-1?
The glucagon-like peptide. Okay.
See, Charles didn't know what that was.
No, I know what that is. Yeah.
You know now. Okay, switching gears with Dr. Davis. Thank you.
Indeed. Charles, not only have you produced a series called The Diabetic You, reversed, all different kinds of reverse are there, and we'll get to that in a minute. But as I was doing my homework to prepare to talk to you, because your arsenal of help and advocacy for the average person with diabetes and at risk for diabetes, and caring for those that have diabetes, it's just so vast. There was something, a series called Longevity, that I was completely unfamiliar with, that did review cancer and risk factors. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, that's a series underneath my brand. It's called 8 Days, actually. And so I didn't call it reverse, obviously, because, you know, you can't per se reverse, you know, it's not the same type of situation as diabetes.
Yeah.
So we called it 8 days because that's the time that we actually spent with the people who were dealing with cancer. So we shot that in Mexico, teamed up with a beautiful company in Mexico that does some tremendous work for cancer. All 5 people that were featured on the show went from 6 months to live to no evidence of detection. All have been tremendous over the last few years since they went to the clinic. And sometimes, chemotherapy and radiation is not the way. Sometimes you get to a point where they say, hey, listen, we've done all we can do on this end. There's not much more we can do. And then there's companies like this that say, hey, listen, we have a different protocol. And a lot of that protocol as well is built around what we eat and, and getting rid of, the inflammation by what we eat and exercise and things like that. And then other infrared treatments and IV treatments and things like that. So they do very good work. And it's a series that kind of, like I said, takes 5 people, takes the ones that they love and kind of understand what it's like living, going through, dealing and treating someone with cancer. So there's never been a series like this where you really can just over 8 days, and trust me, a whole lot can happen in 8 days. It's a powerful series. Yeah.
The reason that I, given that it's about cancer, I thought it very important to bring this up for our audience, is because the risk factors for many of the disparities that affect minority communities, the risk factors that are common to obesity and heart disease and diabetes and cancer, they overlap. And with those risk factors, we see lots of inflammation and also some of the treatments that are available for managing some of those risk factors. They're one and the same. So I wanted to highlight those things. If we are overweight, that extra fat isn't just an inert store extra in our bodies. Fat cells of hormones, their own set of enzymes that affect the way our body stores and functions and affects the adjacent organs. And we see things like fatty liver and fat in the pancreas and gallbladder issues and kidney issues. All of those things are more readily present when there is obesity. We also see heart disease and cancer. We see, again, lots of these elements and chronic diseases overlap. Charles did this series in Mexico, and the people of Hispanic ethnicity have a higher risk factor because in some, in many of their body builds, it's more android or apple shaped, where the fat is held in the center behind the muscle that again affect those main organ functions, and again is more metabolic. We see that likewise in India and Asia. Well, India is in Asia, but in China and in lower South Asian type countries. These are very important points to raise, because sometimes we don't look at smaller people, even though their middles are straight, but you don't consider smaller people at the same risk. But it's not necessarily the size of the person, it's where that fat lies. And in these populations, the BMI, body mass index, where we are considered overweight at 25, they're considered overweight at 23. So small fat metabolic actually puts you at higher risk for some of these issues. And I just wanted to mention that a few statistics around the world, diabetes is an epidemic, not just here in the United States, where it's more than 37 million persons in the United States, have diabetes, with about 20% not knowing that the diabetes is there. 537 million around the world. This is between 20 and 80. They live with diabetes. The average is 3 and 4 have diabetes again across the world, and this is in low and middle income countries. So they don't even have the resources that we need to manage our diabetes. So with some of the treatment agents that we have available, very, very fortunate to have more access to these than other people in the world. And I just wanted to make those points.
Thank you.
Great points made. With our last few minutes, don't know where the time went, Charles, but it's been a powerful, packed show with information. And let me give a shout out to Ntouch News because, and to our viewers, and if you're catching this show later, go to intouchnews.com. This is so prevalent. There's an article on diabetes, and it's by Trey Brady. Might be a name you know, Charles, but let's go and check that article out. Thank you, DJ CEO. But I want to give you the opportunity, Charles, for final thoughts in our last couple of minutes. And Dr. Davis will point us to some resources. If we need to share them in our thank you post, we will. And I'll come back and wrap this show up. Charles?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I would definitely say to anyone listen, take this condition very, very seriously. The comorbidities that come with this can be very tragic. I've seen stuff that literally will curl your toes back from diabetes. And that can happen to any one of us if we have uncontrolled diabetes that we're really not doing what we need to do for. And also be your own advocate, you know.
Be your own advocate.
Diabetes, understand what diabetes is. Yeah, a lot of times if you talk to somebody with diabetes who's had it for years, if you ask them what it is, they couldn't even tell you, right? But somebody who with brain cancer knows everything about their brain cancer. So learn about diabetes, understand what it is, and be a little bit vain. And what I mean by that is that's what I did. When I was diagnosed, I remember literally coming home and looking in the physical mirror and also the spiritual mirror. But I looked in that mirror and I said, Lord, what have you been eating, brother? And that's when I literally, like I said, that's it. And I changed, I lost the weight, slimmed back down, face looking good, all of this. Sometimes I feel like I want to go back to how I looked in high school. And what I mean by that is we could all remember what we looked like when we were in high school, right? And then we have our Facebook friends and we like, man, what have they been eating? You know, Johnny doesn't look the same. Nicole look like she done gained, 250 pounds. We don't have, there's nothing wrong with a bit of vanity where you look in the mirror and say, you know what, I need to look like this. I need to get back to this. I need to get back to my best. So that's what I did. I looked in that mirror and said, brother, this, what you're looking like right now is not right. And I took that vanity, not in a bad way, and said, it's time to, number one, get my health right, but also look like I used to look. So that's a key thing, but this is a serious condition and you have to take it very serious.
And you have to take it very serious. To your credit and to you, Dr. Davis, let me just share. We have a gentleman, he has his own podcast, talks all over. And Donald Dowridge says he wants to thank you all. He said he has learned a tremendous amount of information about diabetes and also the correlation with cancer. He said, he respects what you all are doing and he wants you to know that you have provided us with some worthy and valid information. Thank you for tuning in, Donald Dowridge. Dr. Davis?
A couple things. First and foremost, thank you, Charles. When I met you after a few years, I hadn't seen you in a while, talked about reverse, and I was not a believer. But with these brand new agents, and if we can get to our healthcare provider for an intervention within those first couple of years of diagnosis early on and treat diabetes aggressively, we actually can develop some kind of metabolic or health memory where our body wants to stay in control. So early intervention is really, really important. And we can take those numbers, that high A1C, and actually move back down, not just in pre-diabetes, but in full remission. And that's what reverse is. Cheryl will put up the resource that Charles has given us on the post show credentials there so that you can have this. And quickly, I just want to give you some symptoms that should take you to the doctor. That darkness and thickness of the skin around the neck, somewhat on your face, your elbows, under your arms, between your thighs, under your bottom, that's something called acanthosis nigricans, and it's a symptom of insulin resistance. If you see that, go to the doctor. hungry, urinating a lot, thirsty, often slow healing wounds, yeast infections, those things likewise should take you to the doctor. Trouble getting pregnant, out of control cholesterol, particularly your low amounts of good and high amounts of triglycerides, high blood pressure, even a little bit high of a blood sugar reading. All of those things are indicators that something's wrong metabolically and it should be checked out. Last, there are some indicators or symptoms that you got to consider that are not modifiable. If you are a minority, if you are over age 35, around 45, and certainly if you're in that 65 Medicare range, if you've had trouble getting pregnant, if you get gout often, and if you know, especially if you're a man, if you get pregnant, you know, all of those things need to be considered risk factors, and you should go to your healthcare provider and get those things checked out.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing that. I'm actually sitting up here looking at my elbows, but I guess this is just over here on a desk. Charles, thank you so much. We're looking forward to meeting you over there on the islands.
Yeah.
Dr. Davis, you are your best you. To our DJ CEO, thank you. This has been phenomenal. As our radio listening audience know, we're making some shift changes. Ntouch News is moving to Saturday. Our podcast has always been on Wednesdays. We will be taking off for the holidays, but expect to come back with some of our specialty shows and a whole new lineup as we begin to kick off our 5th anniversary with Let's Talk Business with Cheryl Jacobson and all of her co-hosts, especially Dr. Shanae Davis. It's been amazing. So a special thank you to you, one of our first shows, Daryl, Tampa Bay, Tammy were there. Thank you for this amazing opportunity. We will catch you all after the holidays. Do like Charles say, pay attention to what you're eating. We're food addicts, and some of the foods that we're eating, the body just can't. It's wreaking havoc on the body. So pay attention. Enjoy your holidays with your family, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and we'll see you back on the other side with all the new shows. Again, thank you. Thank you to our radio listening audience. We love you. Diabetes in You, Dr. Davis, Charles Maddox. This show is a wrap. Thanks, everybody.